to hear you say that the first part was harder. The stuff that led up to it, the domestic abuse that you endured, that led up to that was harder than the actual incident itself. I think it's telling. I really do.
I think saying that domestic abuse is harder than getting shot in the face. Yeah. It's telling about how much you went through.
Welcome back to Cases and Cocktails. I'm Bryan Eggleston. This is my beautiful wife, Janice. How are you?
Fabulous. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. This is episode 50. We made it 50 of these, didn't we?
We did.
You look beautiful today.
Thank you.
Golly. No, oh, my bad. Sorry, I got sidetracked a little bit by my beautiful wife, Jason. Jason Witt, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm here to keep you on track, man.
That ain't no lie, man. Somebody needs to.
You know, it's not easy with such beauty right next to you, right?
That ain't no lie, man. I appreciate it, Jason. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to talking to you a little bit. Let me ask you a quick question. You are currently in North Carolina, is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Fantastic.
That's right. Raleigh, just outside of Raleigh.
That's fantastic. And I want you to know that I know that you miss Texas. You miss Austin a lot. And so we're going to celebrate and kind of, we want you to feel like you're back in Texas. We're going to drink tequila today. Is that okay?
There you go. I got it.
That'll work.
I'm going to go with water because it's a bit early for me, but you know.
That's fair. That's fair. I tell you what.
I'll have a tequila later today in your honor.
That'll work, man. That'll work.
There you go.
I tell you what, Jay, what kind of drink do we have?
Coconut Margarita with Ocho Tequila, coconut cream, triple sec lime juice, and coconut flakes for garnish.
Nice, Jason. While I try this drink, are you? What is
involved?
It is involved. There's a lot going on here.
Fernanda's showing off today.
I'm thinking tequila bottle, pour it,
right.
and and we're done. But,
that's pretty much it. That's how I like it.
Is that under 10 ingredients?
Hey, Jason, what is your preferred adult beverage?
Cheers.
Well, I am a big fan, of Shinerbach. That is my go-to drink, and when I can find it here in Raleigh, I still go to that. So I'm more of a beer guy. Liquor is kind of a funny, it kind of hits you different.
Oh yeah,
as you get older. So I kind of stick with beer these days. But Shinerbach was always my drink.
That's fair, man. That's fair. We will. You have a tequila for me later, and I'll have a Shiner for you.
Yeah,
how about that? That'll do.
There you go.
Jason, we're excited to have you here today, man. We want to talk to you. You before we got on, you and I were talking, and
right.
You've got an amazingly just, I don't know, absurd, insane story that you're going to tell us that you lived through, by the way. But what you and I were talking about, and I think it's really important, is your situation, though, isn't much different than what a lot of other people deal with, right? When we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about family violence, we're talking about a really bad relationship that turned physical, violent, and that's not unique. That happens a lot, right?
Yeah, well, I truly believe that's the case. When we're talking about what makes my story unique is because it turned into domestic violence, where a female on male domestic violence. I think when most people think of males going through domestic violence, they think of same-sex partner type violence, right? So when it's female on a male domestic violence, it's rare to rise to that occasion. But if you look at the years that led up to that, there's a lot of, I like to consider it domestic abuse. I like to talk about it in domestic abuse because I think that's, in a lot of ways, that was more traumatic for me. What makes my story unique is that it has this dramatic finale at the end that is, a crazy story. But I think thousands upon thousands of men and women go through the kind of domestic abuse that led up to that attack. And so, I'm happy to use the fact that my story is unique because of the attack, but I think it's more important to talk about the kinds of struggles people go through, and the signs that you might be able to kind of help someone else going through it to figure it out sooner, so that they won't get into a situation like mine. And there's certainly a lot of learning lessons that I have, but a lot of it has to do with the early stages, right? So,
Right.
So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
I think.
And Jason, I want to point something out real fast. And we're going to get to your story. I want to get to the book.
Yeah.
I want
Yep.
all of it. I want to get to all of it. But man, to hear you say that is knowing what you went through. To hear you say that the first part was harder. The stuff that led up to it, the domestic abuse that you endured, that led up to that was harder than the actual incident itself. I think it's telling. I really do.
I think saying that domestic abuse is harder than getting shot in the face. Yeah. I think that's really telling about, it's telling about how much you went through and how traumatic it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think when we're talking about a man, what's important to a man, right? His integrity, his name, his, the respect he gets from his community, his family, all of that was under attack by domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Domestic violence relieved me of all that
things.
pressure, because the world finally got to see how crazy it really was. Right? Because, for, a couple of years, it's just a he said, she said, and that, happens a lot in courts, and the courts have a hard time, understandably, trying to figure out, who's who.
Right.
And, when you're kind of under the gun as a man, being falsely accused of all this stuff that, your family knows you're not that person, but they're going to be seeing, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And in my case, there was some smoke, right? And there was understandably some doubts about my story because of of the kinds of things that she did. So that the attack on my integrity, I will take a bullet to the heart before I take my name being.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a bit hyperbolic, obviously.
But I think,
like when it really came down to it. But I mean, I think that kind of gets to the heart of why the domestic abuse is a bit more traumatic. I mean, sitting on a witness stand with kind of feeling like the judge is not believing your story. Right. I mean, that's hard. And when you're under threat of a potential protective order that will be broadcast across the entire state, I mean, you're as good as a criminal.
Yep. 100%.
And that's what you're fighting against.
And you're looking down the barrel of that, by the way, while you're sitting there, and you're trying not to be overly defensive, but man, you feel like you should be really defensive right there in that spot, because it's the time to be defensive, right? You're being accused of some pretty heinous stuff. I want to do this. I want to talk about kind of how this started and kind of what that domestic abuse looked like, sort of, that led up to this. So you got married, obviously, right? Remind me, what was the year?
So it was 2006 when we got married.
And how long before y'all had kids?
So, I mean, that's about a lot of the personal side of it that, before kind of leading up. So let me give you a real brief recap of that story, because the kids are, we had two kids. The first kid came about a year and a half into our marriage. But so we met in late summer of 2005. And she told me she was pregnant in March of 2006.
Okay.
We were married by June of 2006, right? So, which went against a lot of my boundaries. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of personal things that, that led to my, acquiescing, I guess, to her demands at the time. But ultimately, those are the factual stories. Right. My first son was born in February of 2007. So I guess, it was less than a year that we had our first child. Yeah. Our second child was actually conceived right before I filed for divorce. Because I made one last attempt at reconciling, and she became pregnant. But I'll be honest, at that point in time, I had been told she was pregnant upwards of 6, 7, 8 times throughout our relationship.
What was the purpose? What was the purpose of that? Was that to get attention? Was that to affect you or manipulate you in some way?
I mean, I've given up. First of all, I tell people you can't reason with the unreasonable, and so I've given up trying to figure out what her true intentions. I believe when it comes to domestic abuse, it's about control, and I believe there was just an element of a need to control the relationship and have what she wanted, which I believe was to be married happily with many, many children, and I believe that was her goal, and she had a vision of herself as a great parent, kind of stay at home mom, and with a successful husband, and that was kind of her. I believe her MO, but
right.
It's kind of hard to speak for someone when there was never really a true understanding of her true motivations.
Yeah. Just real fast, when she would tell you that she's pregnant, and I don't want to get bogged down too much. I'm very curious, morbidly curious about this. She tells you you're pregnant, or that y'all are pregnant, and does the stuff. I mean, at some point you find out she's not. Is that just a train wreck when that happens?
Or is that in that year? So I was, as an IT consultant, I was traveling out of town every week, right? Mm-hmm. So I was only in town on the weekends. So she told me she was pregnant. She was very hesitant to tell me. She told me over the phone while I was, I believe, in St. Louis at the time, and she told me she had lost the baby about a month before the wedding. When things were already in play, also when I was out of town. Now I saw a sonogram of the baby, but she also worked at a hospital. I can't tell. At this point, I can't tell you what was true or not.
Man, that's crazy.
So I mean, and there's a lot of backstory in terms of the personal, in terms of how it kind of got to. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not looking to.
No, and I don't
get too much into that, right? We can go into the weeds and all that, but there's a lot of backstory to a lot of those things. And I was not the first person that this happened to. Wow. I didn't realize that until
time. Right, yeah.
Until much later. When I married her, I believed when I met her, she had a 6-year-old daughter. And she was 24. I was 32. She was 24. And she had a 6-year-old daughter. When I met her, the story that I had was that she was raped, and she had the child, and he had gone to jail for a few months, and but hadn't stayed in her daughter's life. The true story, what I found out after everything came out, was that she was actually married to this man, right? And then there's another man in between that ended up kind of going through similar things where she said she was pregnant and kind of thing. So this was a bit of a pattern. Yeah, she just happened to perfect it a little bit better when I was there, and then you add in the fact that I wasn't in town, right? So it was a little bit easier maybe to pull things over me on him, right? Yeah. So
it's crazy.
How long into your relationship was it before you discovered that she in fact had been married before?
So we got married in June of 2006. I finally got the true answer from her mother in, I want to say May or June of 2009.
Wow.
And I filed for divorce in September 2009.
And my next question was going to be, how did you find out? But her mother told you?
Well, yeah. So, I was pressing her mom a little bit on some questions because, the marriage was, there were signs before the marriage and then, pretty quickly into the marriage. But, with where I was at the time, 32 years old, I was a bit at a crossroads. I made a lot of excuses for her. Right. And kind of gave her benefit of the doubt. She was, pregnant, just lost a child. She was having some troubles. So I gave her a lot of benefit of the doubt, which was, a bit of a mistake because a lot of my boundaries are crossed.
But you can't call it a mistake though, Jason. I mean, you're doing.
Say it again.
I said you can't call it a mistake. I mean, you're doing the best you can to navigate.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think most men, they want to do the right thing.
Right.
Right. But, I think there were, looking back, there were learning lessons that, at the time, my boundary was, I was not going to get engaged to a woman unless I'd been dating her seriously for a year. And in this scenario, we had met and were married under a year. So that was against my boundary. Like, that's the biggest learning lesson I have from all this is I was not firm enough in my boundaries because of kind of the struggles I was going through and some insecurities I had at the time that, I was kind of taking a lot on myself that a few relationships before that had not worked out. Right. Yeah. And I kind of, had a kind of come to Jesus moment myself saying, I got to take accountability. Right. So, and that's where I was at.
So what was the event or what was the final straw that made you decide that you were going to file for divorce?
Well, there's a lot of stories that went on during the, there's a lot of crazy stories that happened, but ultimately in about May or June, right around when I was having those conversations with her mom, we had decided we would both go to therapy. Okay. And, she was saying that I was going through menopause and that I was bipolar, just making all kinds of accusations. I didn't take those seriously, but I said, what, if I want her to go to therapy, I'll go to therapy too. I started therapy. And then 2 weeks later I said, you're going to start therapy too. And she just flat out said, I don't need therapy. This is all you. And that's what, if, you don't have a partner that's real willing to work. Right. I didn't think I was guilty, right, necessarily, but, I was willing to kind of go and talk to a therapist and, if I was, take the heat for it, right?
Take the accountability, take ownership of it and do what you need.
Right. Yeah. But she wasn't willing to do that on her part. And that's what made me say, all right, this is it.
So 2006 starts and, y'all got married in 2006. And how long into it, before you realized that it was domestic abuse that you were being engaged in, or you were being thrust?
How does the day of the wedding sound? Right. So the wedding was an absolute catastrophe. Right.
The day you didn't even make it one day. All right, one day. All right.
Yeah, no, that
Jason,
wedding.
There's just so many.
I still had a chance to say, this is it. But it was like the day of the wedding. And, and again, I chalked it all up to the fact that she had just been pregnant. She just lost a baby. Yeah. And, the stress of that she had gone through to set up the wedding, I excused it a lot. But, the wedding day was a pretty ugly day. And, she was like, I sat there getting message after message saying, I'm not going to show up. I'm not going to show up. I'm not going to show up, and then I get there, she had made a real strong point that we weren't going to drink at the wedding. And she comes up, to the altar, and first thing out of her mouth is, I'm really drunk. Right. So it's just like, Jesus Christ. So, yeah. So but it was just a mess of a day. And, and then, so things calmed down after that, for a while, and we kind of settled into marriage. Things were good. And then, but things kind of would crop up. It was kind of like a cycle. She would kind of go through craziness, and then it would slow down, and things would be good. And,
She made a lot of accusations against you. When did those start?
Well, truly, the accusation started the day I filed for divorce.
Okay, 2000.
But she was setting them up prior to the divorce.
What was she doing to set them up?
So in May of 2009, this was probably the craziest of what happened during the marriage. We had, in May of 2009, my cousin was getting married in Austin. And so my entire family was coming into town, Thursday and Friday. My mother was going to be staying with us, coming into town on that Thursday. Wednesday morning, she was telling me to get out of the house because I worked remotely, but I had an office. So I could go into the office or I could work at home. But with family coming into town, I was trying to get everything ready. So I was not wanting to go into the office. I was wanting to, kind of work and get things done, preparing for family. And she was like, just get out of the house, get out of the house. And I was like, no, I'm not. She called the cops. The cops show up right after she had thrown my computer out the back door. And my computer was kind of destroyed. I didn't press charges. I just said, no, it's fine. But that story happens. Then Andrea goes kind of away. I'm working with what I can do with my computer, trying to figure out my computer and all that and blah, blah, blah. The next day, my mom's in town. She goes out to shopping with Andrea. My mom comes back and she walks up to me and goes, "What happened to her arms?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" I had no clue. She's like, "Her arms are all bruised up on both sides of the arm." And she did. And I finally went in there going, and looked and said, "Show me your arms." And she had these huge bruises. I have no idea. I swear she might have taken a bat or whatever. Her mom eventually told me that she saw the finger marks on me. I had no idea. But this happened right as my entire family was coming into town for my cousin's wedding. And then she spent the weekend, wearing short sleeves and, strap dresses, just showing it all off. And, that weekend was kind of was a bit of an eye opener.
What did your family say? I mean, they have to be looking at you like you're a monster.
Well, look, I'm 32 years old. My family, knew who I was. They knew I was not that kind of a person. But again, I bring back to where I said, where there's smoke, there's fire. And that's the first time I heard that comment, come back to me, that a family member had kind of said that. They didn't necessarily believe it, but there are doubts, could there be? I mean, she's got these big bruises, right? Well, and she had, during the wedding, she had made some comments kind of trying to sound as if she was a little nervous about, saying no to me or something to that effect.
Right.
She was really playing it up at that point.
Well,
so go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, it's difficult, and this happens a lot. We see this a lot, and when it plays out in court, or even when a client comes to us and they're accused of something, they say, "Well, I didn't do it." Right? Same situation for you, right? Where they say, "Hey, I didn't do it," and then you're like, "Okay, well, what's an alternative theory?" Right? Like, how else could this have happened? Didn't you have to allow yourself to believe, and particularly in your instance, that someone out, like this other human being went out and intentionally harmed themselves to the point to where it created physical, bruising on her arm and this sort of stuff in order to set you up? And you're like, okay, well, no one can believe that, right? I mean, that's just that's
I'll be the first one to admit that I would have believed her over me.
Yeah, and then you go back.
You have to go back to.
You have to go back to.
You do not fathom that someone's willing to go to that lengths.
Yes,
right. And so, again, you can't reason with the unreasonable.
Right.
You can't go there, and you don't. I mean, I tell people, when I met her, I won the lottery. I was just playing the wrong jackpot, right? She's one in a million, right? I mean, you don't run into these very often, and so you don't expect it, and you just don't think that they're capable. I mean, reasonable people don't do that.
Yeah. So you filed for divorce, and that's when the false allegations started.
Yeah. So about that. Well, right. So the reason I brought up that story that happened in May of 2009, September 4th, 2009, I filed for divorce. I had stayed with friends. She was going to get served at the house. I didn't hear anything. It was like 8:00. I was trying to, get in touch with the lawyer. I wasn't hearing anything. I finally have my buddy drive me back to my house and say, just be with me when I go there, because, this might get
ugly.
This might get, actually, when I filed for, no. Yeah, when I went back, she was gone. She was completely gone. She was not at the house. And, and I noticed in her closet, her little slip was actually kind of closed in the closet. So she had left. And then, Saturday morning, she's, texting me, we're talking, and no one served her. And that kind of went on. And then she had taken my kids to East Texas, where her parents lived. Mm-hmm. And I was able to kind of get that from her, but not necessarily where. And then it was Sunday night. She's saying, I'm going to come back tomorrow, but I need you out of the house. Monday morning, she's like, I need you out of the house by 9. And 8:10, are you out of the house? I'm almost out of the house. 8:20, are you out of the house? Like, she just nagging me to get out of the house. And I finally said, okay, I'm out, 8:45. And I went and stayed with my buddy. The following Thursday, my lawyer writes me and goes, Jason, are you sure Andrea is at the house? I said, I don't know. I have no proof of that. She says she is. I go back to the house on Thursday afternoon with my buddy, with my friend, and she's not there. And that slip is still sitting in the same way it was left Friday night. She had never come back to the house. She was just messing with me.
Wow.
And so, that's when we filed for an emergency court hearing. And so September 11th, we had that emergency court hearing. And in that hearing, pictures of her bruised arms were presented to the judge as proof of my abuse and why she needed to be stay in East Texas. Right. So that's when things really took off. That's when it really, truly became real. Yeah. That I was,
did the
being
judge
accused
believe
of
her?
abuse. What was that?
Did the judge believe her?
Well, everything was going my way in the emergency court hearing. She was going to be returned to East Texas. The judge had a recess. Her lawyer then gave him pictures of her arms, and I just remember the judge. He just goes, "Oh, Jesus!" And then all of a sudden, everything flipped, and we had to have. I was restricted from seeing the kids for a month. We were going to have another hearing on October 5th. There was a TRO against me, and I couldn't see my kids. Right. So that's kind of how it worked. I'm like, everything was going my way in the court hearing. Then she presented these pictures because it didn't go her way. She presented these pictures as proof of my abuse. And that's kind of where things started.
That's what's, and we said this at the beginning, and I think that's why it's important. It's not even that unique. Like, that happens. We talk about it. We talk about this all the time. We talk about it, and we talk about it from both angles, right? We talk about it from the angle that we're discussing now, which is, someone is making up allegations, doing things, and really creating this narrative in order to either A, control somebody, B, manipulate them, C, get a litigation advantage, whatever it is. We talk about it oftentimes too, and when in a situation where someone is actually being abused, right? And they're trying, and the person that's abusing them is making that person come off as being irrational or illogical, right? And doing the things, and it's difficult because you ultimately you have someone up there, a judge, who's trying to make a decision based off limited, it's based off very limited information. A court hearing's not like this, right, where we sit down and just kind of chop it all up and do the things. It's very formal, and that person has to make decisions. And we talk about it often. It's done out of precaution,
Well, and like
TRO
Jason said earlier, it's a bunch of he said, she said, because when you're talking about a marriage, a lot of stuff happens behind closed doors at home, and the only two people that know what happened are the spouses, and then they go in, and the judge has to believe one of them. Right.
Somebody, you got to make some decisions, and most of the time, the things are done out of precaution. I want to,
and you can't fault them for that, right? I mean, of course not. Like, I understand the judge taking a look at that and all the information he has, wanting to, take things seriously and kind of proceed cautiously. Yeah, I get it.
You went through this. You went through the court. Y'all finally got divorced, and you ultimately got divorced.
How long were you going through a divorce before it was finalized?
Like as I said, she was pregnant with my younger son when I filed for divorce. She was maybe 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks pregnant, maybe a little bit more. So in Texas, I think you guys know you can't get divorced. You can't finalize divorce until until the child is born. So we ultimately finalized the divorce. It was in December, but it was kind of filed, I think, in January of 2011 is when the divorce was actually truly finalized.
And did you guys have a final trial? Did you come to an agreement? How did you guys end up settling the case or finalizing?
Well, there was, first of all, there were 6 TROs put against me, all attempts to put a protective order against me. So that was all part of it. There was a lot of stuff that went on, I had cops showing up at my house saying I'd burglarized her home. There were, prank phone calls. It was just just a constant stream. But to make the kind of the long story short, in the end, we had a mediation, and I truly will always feel like I was just taking over the coals.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in that situation, you're ready to, I will burn it all down. I don't, I just want out. Right. And so, like you're just beaten down. I just want out. And people are so damaged by that, right? Because you just want out. It's worth every piece of every dime, it's just get me out. Right. So, like I gave up way more than I should have given the situation, but it was ultimately mediated. We came to an agreement and, finalized the divorce in January of 2011.
Isn't it telling that someone who alleged that you were subjecting her to domestic violence and that you're this terrible, scary guy, tried to get all of these protective orders and TROs, ultimately came to an agreement with you on visitation? I mean, it's clear that there was just a
sort
campaign.
of. I mean, she wanted me to give up.
Yeah, it was that, and that's what it was. But if you were truly that kind of a scary guy, it would have gone to trial. Those cases don't settle. They go to trial because you're ultimately agreeing to a protective order and supervised visitation, or the other side's giving up. Those cases don't usually settle. They go to trial. Yeah. So there was this campaign of terror to beat you down. You get to mediation, and by then you're emotionally, physically, and probably financially drained. And you just want out. So what was the visitation scheduled? Was she primary?
Yeah, she was primary. And what and I will say, anybody going through this, documentation is the single most important thing that you can do during this period. During one of the TROs, we had a guardian ad litem that was appointed, and then she had someone that that would help me with parental supervision, right? So for a while, it was court ordered that I would have parental supervision while I had my kids. But then I kept her on, and I paid her $15 an hour every hour that I had with my kid. She took meticulous notes. That's what ultimately kind of forced her hand. Like, she was not in a good position by that time to really, because judges were starting to kind of come against her, at that point. So, it was documentation that made it that case. But so, and I'm sorry, like you're fine. The question. So she was primary. I had, I think, a couple hours Tuesday, Thursday, and then every other weekend, kind of a thing, somewhere to that effect. Yeah. But we had to step up because my younger son was, just a year and a half, so we had kind of a step up plan. To work with him. So, it was, fairly standard in terms of what they come when, one parent is primary and the other is not. You have kind of limited time with an expectation with making up some time in the summers.
Okay.
Right.
And so you ended up on an investigation discovery show. You have a book. I feel like there's more to the story.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, So like everything started finally turning my way after the divorce. So, I finally got her right before we mediated. I finally got her to get out of the marital home because, she had been staying there, and I was basically living on $400 a month because of everything I had to pay for her. So I was finally able to force her out of the marital home. I get back to the marital home. The home's a mess. We finalized divorce. We go for a few months going okay. But she was needing to find a job, and so she was like, "I want to move to East Texas." I was like, "No, that's fine, but you still need to abide by the court order." Right. So in the fall of 2011, she starts not showing up at all for the visitations, and so I was literally going to where we met. I would go into, I think it was one of the burger shops right there. I would buy a drink. I would keep the receipt. I would, say, here's my receipt. I was here when I needed to be. And then she skipped, the Thanksgiving, visitation. In December of 2011, I had a pretty good case to make. And the attorney, by that time, the case had been transferred to Williamson County. And the judge said outright, he's like, "You guys have a pretty good case here." And he threatened her with either just losing custody or jail time or, a fine or all three. Right. And so he gave me temporary custody for a month, and we were going to come back and revisit everything on February, I believe, 12th or 13th of the next month after we had met. And so I had temporary custody for a month. She got one weekend. She had her weekend, the third weekend, she had her weekend. She was going to return my kids on Monday. I'm a Patriots fan because I grew up in New England. The Patriots had the Super Bowl February, whatever it is, 11th, or February 5th, I think it was, 2012, and they lost. And my, being the only Patriots fan in a Texas bar, they were just plying me with drinks. So I got home pretty good and toasty. At 4 a.m., I was woken up with a police baton.
Hold on. Before you get there, hold on 1 second.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Hold on 1 second, because here's what I want to do. What you're about to say next changed your life dramatically.
Yeah.
You would have never, in the history of the world, you would have never guessed that it would have happened to you, right?
Untrue.
Really?
Yeah. So and I'll just give you a little bit of background. In April of 2010, I was trying to figure. I knew what I was going to go through was going to be hard. I was looking to see, maybe I could get friends to kind of help me out. And so I started this kind of blog. And in that blog, my first entry, I said, "This woman will be the death of me." Wow. I don't mean that metaphorically. This woman will try to kill me eventually.
Wow.
And
you
so,
said that in 2010.
Predicted this in April of 2010. This happened in February of 2012. So, but just about a month before this happened, a therapist finally had me convinced that she was not likely to commit violence against me because she had no history of it, as we knew at the time, of doing any kind of physical violence. So. Yeah, at the time I was convinced that, I was kind of placated, thinking she was not going to do anything.
There's no way it's going to happen.
But it was at the back of my mind. It was there.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to break this up. We're going to tease this, and what we're going to do is I'm going to wrap this up because one, you've told a great preface of what is to come, but more importantly, sort of the ordeal that led up to this. We're gonna actually wrap this episode up. We're gonna come back with episode 51. Will be this. Will be you telling us what actually happened. Is that fair?
Okay. I think that's great. And I was kind of looking at the time, going, this is kind of going long.
We're going to run out of time, and I don't want it to be short. I want to hear exactly what happened. I want to hear what you went through. So let's do that, guys. Y'all stay tuned. Come back next week. We're going to do episode 51. We're going to have Jason tell us what happened that night that led to just his entire life changing at that moment. Jason, thank you so much for going through everything with us today.
Yeah, absolutely, guys.
Guys, y'all stay tuned for next week, and we'll see you back here for episode 51.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next Friday.